So like two of attendants or servants are shown holding umbrella or Dyrus, I think. This is Dyrus because I have been twice to the Persepolis, so I know this is basically Dyrus and how two attendants are shown holding umbrella or Dyrus. So like this was the ceremonial use of umbrella. It shows then how much importance it gained in these civilizations. So from Iran, it reached to the Asia, to the like India and Pakistan. And it was here, and there is a lot of discussions about where the first canopy or chhatri appeared. Who was the first to build or erect chhatri? And even about the term chhatri, there is an interesting discourse by Sindhi scholars. They believe this is like Chukundi, and some believe that Chukundi is rather an architectural term which is not about use chhatri but others. So the possible origins is in Sindh, but we have some evidence of chhatris which were transformed into architecture by slave rulers. So one of the rulers, Iltutmish, it is believed that when he built first tomb, there was the first tomb in Indo-Pak for his son Nasiruddin at Sultan Gadi. Some believe that the canopy, later on a canopy was also erected there. So that is believed to be the first canopy, but that claim is disputed. So these are some of the chhatris that we find at Hoz Khas, and these were basically commissioned by some of the Tughlaq rulers. And when we talk about chhatri, we're basically referring two types of like chhatri. One is freestanding, and other is used as ornamental kiosks that always crown the crowns of the tomb. So like these are some of the tombs at Delhi. One is Isa Khan, and you can find on the how like chhatri is used on the as a corner kiosks. So now I have to be quick. So as far as the origin and development of chhatri in Sindh, because we always look for the influences, we always look for the outer influences. But if you look at this slide, this is like the gold coin from Kushan period. And this gold Kushan period coin depicts three deities, Kumaro, Iskando, and Mahasino. So in the middle is shown Mahasino, and the similar representation of the shrine dedicated to three deities have been documented in Nali Valley. And it is interesting that we have an inscription nearby this shrine, which says that this shrine was dedicated to three deities, Kumaro, Iskando, Bizago, and Mahasino. So I believe this might be one of the earliest evidence that we have in the rock art. And then there is another evidence. This is a domed structure that we call pavilion. So rather than looking for the outer influence in that chhatri came all the way from India and other parts, I think we should look in our own land. So this is a possible inspiration for the local, the rulers to erect chhatri. And these were basic chhatri were more empirical because all these were made of the wood and perished very quickly. So now the problem is in Sindh when we say which was the first chhatri. I'm sorry, this is like the Ghazi Shah, or is it also Ghazi Khan, but the second is not Feroz Shah, is a typo. It is basically Muhammad bin Tughlaq or Jam Tamachi. So like which was the first chhatri? I believe, and I have written an article, the symbolism of canopy, a symbolism of canopy in one of my books, and I discussed that I believe that the earliest chhatri that was built on the soil of land belongs to the Ghazi Khan. And that Kshatri basically provided prototype to the Muhammad bin Tughlaq when he died near Tata while chasing rebellious Thagi. He died near Tata and he was buried temporarily at Lal Shahbaz Qalandar, and that was the second Kshatri. And in Tata, no doubt it was Jam Tamachi Kshatri. The Kshatri of Jam Tamaji was the first Kshatri to appear at the new capital of Samoi. So like this is the images that shows canopy of Ghazi Shah or Ghazi Khan. So it is this first attempt was made. You see that it was a very crude attempt because the both like a square and octagonal decorated pillar was used, so engaged pillars. And then if we see the chronology of the canopies or Kshatris in Sindh, we have a large number of Kshatris erected by Samas, followed by Tarkhan, Mughals, Kalhura, Talpur, and few by British. So like the Samas, I believe, are the Kshatri builders. So the origin in Sindh, in Tata, can be traced back to the Samas. So like the first Kshatri that appeared at Makli was that of Jam Tamachi. So there were two forms that these Kshatris assumed. One was hexagonal and other was octagonal. So these are some of the glimpses of the Kshatris. This belongs to the Jam Tamachi, followed by, this is the Kshatri south of the Jam Nindo. So like most of the Kshatri at the Sama cluster are hexagonal or octagonal. And then we have some Kshatris in Talpur and Tarkhan period. Even the Kshatriya Pir Pato is believed to have been erected during the Tarkhan period. So like the new change took place during Tarkhan period. Like one of the innovations that they brought was that earlier we had two types of Kshatris, like one was hexagonal and other was octagonal. But in Tarkhan period, we have a square Kshatri, which was basically introduced by Tarkhans. And after Tarkhan, then we have like Mughal period, but basically these were the Mughal governors. So like these Tarkhan governors also built a few canopies, Kshatris. Prominent belong to the Mirza Badiuzzzaman and Tughril Beg. And like in during this period, so another interesting thing was like the Kshatri become a more complex. Earlier we had a more hexagonal, octagonal, simple freestanding Kshatris, and then we see a new trend taking place that these Tarkhan governors of the Mughal introduce a walled mosque along with a Kshatri. And these are some of the Kshatris. And then from octagonal means 8-pillared to the 12-pillared. So we see another change that we see in Tarkhan governors period, 12-pillared Kshatri. And during that period, there was another interesting, that these Tarkhan governors were like this. There are some Mughal Kshatris, some are here, and some other were erected in Sakkar. So this picture shows the Kshatri of Mir Masoom Shah. And at that period, when these people were erecting Kshatris, so possible source of information came from Makli, and the round Kshatri, one of the very impressive Kshatri, was erected over the mortar remains of Jam Murid at Karachi. And we have then if we talk about now, let's come back to the Tata. When we talk about Tata, we have apart from Makli, there are many graveyards where we can find Kshatris. The most remarkable is that of the graveyard of Lako Pir, where we had 13 Kshatris, out of which I think 9 have survived. And it was here that we have different forms of Kshatris, 4-pillared, hexagonal, 8-pillared, 12-pillared, even a 16-pillared canopy was erected here. And then we can see some chhatris were made in other parts of Sindh during the Kalora period, and we find these chhatris at the Chitori and some at Koboshadad. And then we have some Talpur period chhatris at Khudabad, and some very few were erected during the British period, which is like found in Sunda and other graveyards. So now I conclude that these chhatris were basically symbols of political power. So it's like legitimizing political power. So before the appearance of these chhatris on Samoi, there was nothing. There was like only residential buildings. I think they have like vanquished in the time. But these chhatris were political symbols, and they symbolize power, authority, centering, and like a clear announcement that this is how these political symbols were used. So like there was a shift from octagonal to the square, and in square we have a 4 pillar, then we made, we keep adding more pillars, and then from 4 we have 8, 12, and even 16. When we added 16, some were erected at Lakopir, but this was not a successful effort by the artisans or masons of Thatta. If you see, those 16 pillar chhatris could not survive. Some were located in Pir Lako, few were at Aban Shah in near Sajawal, and few were other at Jati, and very few belong to the Keher of Kakrala, Jams of Kakrala. So this is all that I wanted to share you. Thank you very much. We have a next speaker, Rabela Junejo. Rabela Junejo would be talking about tomb of Isa Khan Tarkhan II, the place of converging architectural idioms.
Assalamu alaikum. So as Zulfikar Saab said, I'll be talking about tomb of Isa Khan Tarkhan, and since the time is short, I won't be getting too much. I thought I had 20 minutes, so I won't be reading from my paper and try to make it this work as a presentation. So basically what I'm trying to state through my paper, it's a part of an ongoing PhD research. So, tomb of Isa Khan Tarkhan II, built in the mid-17th century under the Mughal rulership of Lower Sindh, is one of the largest tomb on or at Makli necropolis. It is built almost entirely of stone and has an extensive decorative program. In the late 17th century, the site of Makli already had a funerary tradition of almost 300 years. That was prevalent on the site that informed the later monuments, according to what I think. How this tradition informs the architecture of Isa Khan Tarkhan, what elements of or from the broader geographical nexus of subcontinent, Persia and Central Asia are observed on the tomb of Isa Khan Tarkhan, and how the tomb establishes its own aesthetic vocabulary by bringing these elements together in a single ensemble. These are some questions that I have investigated in my paper and will try to present them. So basically, construction of tomb, if we look at the books, it's basically prohibited, and paradoxically there is a proliferation of funerary monuments within the context where the Muslims were patron builders or they were ruling. So during my investigations, I came across these certain ideas that probably the need to have a tomb in the first place is maybe because of the idea of having shade over the grave, the idea of having ascension, because these so the flat graves do not really provide you with that verticality. So it might be having a tomb on top with a dome on top, or a tomb tower for that matter, will probably make it feel as if the soul of the deceased is transcending to the heaven, probably. And the idea of veneration of people coming later on and being there for posterity. So they've been dealt in detail in the paper. I'm not going to go into them. And as this structure, These structures were basically no mean feat. A lot of revenue and a lot of resource and human labor and material went into it. So, and they were, Makli is not unique in having funerary structures, but what it is unique for is having a pluralistic identity, which is what interests me. So anybody who is a student of history of architecture or who has studied history of architecture in their bachelor's program would be aware of the fact that we study architectural history in styles. And these styles are very stereotypic, taxonomic classifications, and only the very best, like the tomb, like Taj Mahal, would make it into the books, but not the monument of tomb of Isa Khan Khan would not make into the textbook. So these taxonomies and the very architecture that is present at Makli kind of defies that. So they're always in this tension. So it was not just the challenge to make it to the history books or to the textbooks, but it's the challenge with the historians as well, where some incline towards more foreign ideas that kind of came towards here, and we did not really have any indigenous architecture, so their leanings are more foreign. Or there's some scholars who say that the architecture was more local and came from the local origin. But I think that I would like to quote Finbar Barry Flood, if I can find that. Yeah. So basically how he puts it, I kind of agree with that ideology, is that the ability of mixed cultural forms to disturb the taxonomic categories upon which the broader canon of Islamic art has traditionally depended is reflected in the omission of early Indo-Islamic monuments from a number of major surveys of Islamic art and architecture. Obviously, he was talking about the Delhi Sultanate period, including surveys of Ghaznavid and Ghurid architecture. Even the relevance of these structures in the history of Indo-Islamic architecture has been questioned within a teleology that sees them as false starts in an evolutionary process that culminates somewhat predictably with the glories of Mughal architecture. So if I go with how Flood sensitizes with the pluralism in architecture in the Sultanate period, and for that matter at Makli as well, so Isa Khandar Khan's tomb would also be a false start. Basically, it's a stone monument. It's built entirely of stone, and it has immense architectural decorative carving, and has certain elements that you can see, jharoka elements. And then this particular opening that you see at the very top is basically the first of the Evans of the 4 Evan plan. And below, these 3 pictures that you're actually witnessing are the gallery, the colonnaded gallery that is provided outside on the major tomb chamber. If you look at the plan, it's a typical 4 Evan plan, or is it just that? It's basically these red circles that you see on the plan. The enclosure is a 4 Evan enclosure, but it's not really opening into a sahan or a court in the center. Normally, conventionally, if I know, the 4 Evans actually open into a vast open space. But here, to accentuate the very monumentality or the importance of the tomb chamber, it's placed at the very center of the intersection of these 4 Evans. And to make the matters worst is that they have this very sterile, prototypical domed square chamber in the center. But what Isa Khandar Khan does, or his architects do, is place this colonnaded gallery all around it, which is visible below. So what he does is, he uses something that is Central Asian, which is a 4 Evan plan. Then he uses something that is a dome square chamber that has been, as per my reading so far, has been crystallized over time. So we're talking about some 16th century, 17th century, 1600, yeah. So we're talking about early, mid 17th century. this prototypical dome square chamber has been crystallized over time as a prototypical form, as I have been repeating it over and over again. But what he does is he places or camouflages it, according to me, with these colonnaded galleries that are very, very local. So the Four-Evan plan, that is not having a conventional courtyard in the center, but the tomb in the center. We see enclosure plans or enclosure typology, if I must use the word, at Makli, but we do not see, we normally see platforms with graves, but here a full-fledged tomb is placed in the center, and it is the prototypicality of it is what I'm trying to say, is challenged by placing these colonnaded galleries that are regional right in the front. So, if you can observe the pillars that, or the columns that we have of the gallery, it uses a 4-bracketed capital, but it used Mukarna moldings as a decorative element. So the 4-bracketed capital is something that has been prevalent tradition at Makli, and it kind of almost 200, 150, 200 years later, we see still the use of a 4-bracketed capital. But the shaft becomes rectangular and the motifs become very, very arabesque. So they are not very indigenous local motifs of lotus or half the lotus vine, etc., etc. But they become arabesque and they become low relief as well. We see on the entrance and at the Mihrab Evan the miniature jharokas that are also a very local element that we see in full force in the tomb of Jam Nizamuddin. So all of these elements, the Four-Evan plan, the miniature jharokas, the 4-bracketed columns, the arabesque moldings or carvings, the dome square tomb but having been camouflaged by a colonnaded gallery all around it, is something that kind of makes it borrowing or adapting and adopting from a lot of traditions that were prevalent on the side and were coming from the east and the west both. So it kind of becomes pluralistic in nature, and I think it's high time that we start looking at them, stop sterilizing monuments, start looking at them having a fusion or a mix of architectural ideas. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Tania Ali Sumro to speak on Sama Trade Network, Art and Architecture of Sama Period. Title of presentation is UNESCO World Heritage Site Management Apprehension.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Tania and I'm an architect and a researcher by profession. I feel really privileged to be part of this platform. Thank you EFT and Culture Department for providing this opportunity to be among the best professionals we have in the region. It's basically self-initiated research and an ongoing research, so not concluded yet. So there are so many aspects that needs to be pondered upon. So for me, the basic criteria for selection of this topic was because I see the matter of Makli has been widely discussed. There are so many discourses available regarding the technical aspects and conservation aspects. But today I'm going to talk about the softer image of those structures. Something that I personally felt whenever I visited Makli, it's about the touristic experience, common person, the experience he takes with him while going home. So as we all know that World Heritage Site, Makli is a World Heritage Site, and what makes it exceptional from the other provincial heritage sites is its outstanding universal value. So for any heritage, I think there's this system of values associated with it, which apprehends its substance and often they prioritize the need for, they help in prioritizing the need for the conservation. And I see value system connected with each other. For example, if the building, if it's old, it will have more tourist attraction, and eventually it will generate more revenue. So that's how all the values are connected with each other. And so according to UNESCO Manual for Cultural Heritage,